president of the Commonwealth Arbitral Tribunal sitting in London, Professor Epiphany Azinge, has emerged as the Asaba Monarch designate as he is set to become the 14th Asagba of Asaba Kingdom in Delta State. Professor Azinge, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria, SAN, was the 5th Director General of the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies. The coronation of Obi Azinge is expected to take place in no distant time, following his overall success in the race for the revered stool of Asagba of Asaba, which reportedly featured 9 other illustrious titled sons of Asaba. The Asagba in Council, which announced the selection of the international legal luminary, stated that Professor Azinge emerged as the most qualified among the 10 contenders in the race for the royal stool. Joining us now to shed more light on the 14th Asagba of Asaba Kingdom in Delta State is High Chief Chuck Nduka-Eze, the Isama Ajie of Asaba. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the morning show.
Morning. Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
It's good to see you in traditional regalia. Not in your uniform as a lawyer or as a major investor in the real estate sector. But before we talk about Professor Epiphany Azinge, let's talk about the departed monarch, Professor Chike Edozien, his legacy. I mean, you were celebrating his century, his 100th birthday, and then he passed to the great beyond. But many will recall Professor Edozien as a very prominent scientist who distinguished himself, in his field before he became the Asagba. And then now we have Professor Azinge coming after him. Is it now a rule in Asaba Kingdom that to be the Asagba, a person must be a professor? Because I've been asking myself, well, Azinge is a distinguished legal scholar. What does he want to do with a traditional stool? But first, let's start with Professor Edozien.
Yes, of course. Thank you very much for that introduction and that acknowledgement. Professor Edozien is probably one of the most distinguished Nigerians. He accomplished many firsts. First dean of when UI was University College London. He was the first Nigerian to become the head of department of medicine. Head of department of, should I continue? Head of department of medicine. Of course, it's known that he went off, to MIT in the US, did some sterling work there. He was in the United Nations. So Asaba has a way of, if I may say so, producing this type of talents. And it's actually remarkable that somebody who has done so much, literally a global figure, saw fit to come back home to become the Asagba of Asaba. Because as we said earlier, all politics is local. He had to come back home to give his best. And he was an Asagba for almost 30-something years, culminating in almost his 100th year that we were trying to celebrate. We had an elaborate centenary year start in January, and then sadly in February, he left us. We will always remember him with affection, with awe, and with respect, because he has earned it. And happily, Nigeria also turned out, in his funeral to see him off. And just like you stated, from one professor to another. I think it's not a rule, but even if it were a rule, I would say it's a very good rule, that people who have accomplished much see fit to come to support traditional institutions. So I see what has happened there as a very, very good beginning, because it does kind of set the bar very high. If we've had Professor Edozien, and now we have Professor Azinge, it means that Asaba can look, to the future, with a sense that we would always have able people steering her affairs.
All right, that's brilliant. Now, I'd mentioned that there were 10 contenders for the stool, for the Asagba of Asaba stool.
Yes.
And Professor Azinge emerged. In fact, it was said that he emerged as a unanimous choice. A large majority, at least, supported his emergence as Asagba of Asaba. What stood him out? Because there were also other contenders who are very, accomplished, experienced,
yes.
who were said to be frontliners. What distinguished him to emerge, and what was the process like, if you can share with our viewers?
Right. Well, the Asagba ship in Asaba moves from one quarter to another. We don't have we don't inherit. It's not one of those things you pass from father to son. We have 5 quarters in Asaba called Abos, and Asaba's stool moves from one Abo to another. The last Abo that had it with the Edosians was a place called Nduka-Eze. So he's now moved to the second quarter, which is Ubomanta. So when he gets there, the Asagba in council and the Ochendo is somebody who is looking after Asaba, whilst the process is going through. The son of Professor Edosian, the last Asagba, is presently the Ochendo. He's supervising the process. So guidelines were issued, traditional guidelines were issued to the Diokpa of Ubomanta to begin the selection process. And this was quite an elaborate process that involved, because even within that quarter, you have different units, right? And there was some conversation whether it should also be rotating within those units or whether the entire quarter, should produce people to vie. Eventually, the entire quarter, it was thrown open. So, as you said, they had, in fact, over 10 contestants. But then, of course, it was eventually sort of reduced to that number. There was even an occasion when it was felt it should be only 2. But then the Ochendo felt that, in fairness, those who want to vie should be allowed to vie, and it became 10. So it took about 2 months for all the consultations to take place within Ubomanta, and for those names to now be sent up to the palace for consideration. Even within that Ubomanta, there are rules as to who is qualified to vie for it, who is not qualified to vie for it. Because within Asaba, you have, as indeed you have in other places, you have people who are considered to be original natives, you have those who are settlers, and you have stuff like that. So particular types of people can become the Diokpas, i.e. the head of that quarter. It's within that circle that also the Asagba can emerge. So all these conversations about who qualifies to be, who does not qualify to be, and of course, with modernity, those conversations are often not no longer as agreeable as they used to be. Yeah. So they went through all that to now produce these 10 people. And these 10 names were now submitted to the Asagba Council for selection. And it's actually quite intriguing because despite this use of the word selection, the actual emergence of an Asagba has some sort of democratic aspect to it. Because the age group referred to as Otuhaza, all the age groups referred to as Otuhaza, are the people qualified to participate in the election, because now it goes to an election. So you've had the selection. Now the next step, when it gets to the palace, for the person to emerge, you now enter a zone of election. So it's all those people who are within Otuhaza who now attend the palace. They are now going to vote for who emerges. So within the 5 villages, they were all instructed to go into different rooms and conduct their election, and then to come out and brief the Asagba Council. And I was present, so I'm able to speak to what I know. I was actually there that day, and this process went through, and all the 5 villages came back with their results. And remarkably, Professor Epiphany Azinge, son, not only emerged as the most popular candidate, but for example, where I come from, which is Ajie, which is the fourth quarter, he scored 100%. I think he scored 100% in another quarter, and then 95% here, 96% there. So it was an overwhelming vote of confidence, I would say.
All right.
Apart from that, within the Asagba council itself, which consists of the palace chiefs and the Diokpas and other leaders.
Okay, if you may just, you know, they've been showing some pictures on the screen there.
Yes.
You know, and in the introduction, we said, you know, the formal ceremony will take place soon.
Yes.
When is soon? When would the actual ceremony take place? That's one. Two, it looks like Professor Azinge is already, you know, on the stool, even before the actual ceremony. You know, I saw some soldiers there. Are those soldiers part of the Asagba council? You know, just because we're talking about traditional institution, yes. We're seeing people in uniform. Are they part of the Asagba council?
No, most certainly not. The Nigerian soldiers are there to protect us, and they can go to anywhere. They're welcome. They're welcome everywhere because they're there to protect us. No, to the first question you raised, on the 5th of October, he would formally take over. But you become an Asaba in Asaba when you've gone through all the traditional processes for assuming the role. And that he's already done. And that's why he's actually now playing his role. But in terms of the official handover from the Edosians to him, to be on the 5th October, which doesn't say that he would not want to celebrate it in a more elaborate way in yet another ceremony. But as we speak, he's presently the Asagba of Asaba because he has actually gone through all the traditional processes required for that. I think the pictures you were looking at from the pictures from the palace of the army was a very, very interesting visit that occurred yesterday. I believe they're called the Army Heritage and Future Center, and they were on an official visit to Delta State. And the governor, it appeared, you know, of course, advised that they should go and have an audience with the Asagba of Asaba. So they went as a group to visit the Asagba. And very, very interesting conversations took place. And they talked about the infamous Asaba massacre. And it appeared for the first time the army acknowledged that something dreadful happened in Asaba, and also impressively talked about looking at ways to see how they could walk through it, you know, to enhance not just the reputation of the army as a force that is there for the protection of everybody, you know, but how the army can actually learn from the things that went wrong in Asaba going forward. So that's a very, very impressive step, and probably shows that our democracy is working.
I know you are actively involved in the Asaba Memorial project.
Yes.
I recall attending a meeting where, you know, you were discussing this. So where are we now with the Asaba Memorial project, which could be one of the legacies of the late Asagba?
Yes. The late Asagba did so much, you know, to encourage us, to back us, and to lead, you know, on the memorial effort, and was constantly appealing to the Nigerian government to do something that would, to some extent, make Asaba feel that her pain and her loss, which was actually a pain derived from nation building, that pain was not in vain. Unfortunately, we hadn't actually accomplished that by the time he left. I'm happy to also say that the present Asagba is also very, very actively involved in the memorial sort of journey. I don't know if you recall when we had the ceremony in January for the centenary year. We actually, there was a project that we launched, which is the planting of 1,000 trees, you know, because over 1,000 people died. So we're using these trees to kind of memorize each person that died. In terms of official recognition and acknowledgement by the country, by the authorities, it hasn't actually happened in a proper way. I just reported to you that fortunately we had this very, very interesting visit from the Army. So it looks like we're set on the right path, and I hope we can build on that.
On that note, I Chief Chuck Nduka-Eze would like to thank you very much, and we look forward to the formal ceremony of the coronation of the Asagba of Asaba. I hope that invitations will be made available far and wide, so that we can come and celebrate with Professor Azinge. Thank you very much.